Greetings, everyone. It's Leah Love again, and I have a huge announcement that I want to share with you all, and that is that I have just launched my personal Patreon page. Super excited about it because this has been a need that required filling. And what I mean by that is that I'm very active on Instagram. Not so much on Facebook anymore. However, I have had numerous individuals in my Instagram DMs and on my page speaking about the fact that they are going through a very difficult time as they transition out of the radical left or somewhat left leaning ideologies and into a more centrist and or right/conservative ideology. And it's really, really difficult for a lot of people because they are finding themselves being ostracized. And as they're being ostracized, they are being blamed for things that they personally did not do. They are being shamed for no longer going with the party line. And at this point, they are feeling quite isolated. And I'm here to share with anyone who will listen and who's interested the fact that you are not isolated, though you may need to find a completely different circle. And in between the point where you decide to walk away from the radical liberal or radical left ideology and into a more centrist and or right frame of mind, sometimes there's that in-between phase where you've walked away, but you haven't yet created connections and bonds with people who are more familiar with your new frame of mind and your new way of thinking. And it's that in-between space that can be very, very challenging and quite lonely sometimes. Oftentimes, I know for those who are in a space where they have had the experience of being a Black person in America, they also have the additional trials and tribulation of not only leaving the left, so to speak, but it also means relinquishing a lot of their affiliations in the Black community. And that is also extremely trying because there is a lot of group tension going on. There is a lot of pressure. There's a lot of crabs in the barrel type mentality that not only are you supposed to be liberal or a Democrat, but you also are supposed to align yourselves with the victimology ideologies or identity politics, which says that because you're Black, you are oppressed. And so that's a separate layer, but also an inclusive layer to this walkaway movement. And so I have, contact with both general people who are generally leaving the left, and then you have the Black individuals who are not only leaving the left but experiencing that additional tiered pressure. But then there is also a separate group who are white, not that they're separate from everyone else, but what I mean by that is the direction from which they approach me, which is that, hey, I am having such a hard time right now because friends that I've had for years are now looking at me sideways. They're saying because I'm white, I have white privilege now. They're saying that, hey, that I am racist when we've been friends all these years and that I just don't understand them. I want to help, but at the same time, I feel really offended and upset and sorrowful at the loss of friendships that I've experienced and at the way in which people are positioning themselves against them. And so, yes, that is a totally different experience that they are having as opposed to the Black people's experience. Both sets are moving closer to the moderate and or the right, but they're coming from different angles as it relates to race. So since I'm not a white woman, I don't feel comfortable in being able to tell other white individuals who come to me in my DMs, hey, this is how you handle it, this is what you need to say. I mean, I could give general tips, but I truly have not ever been a white person, so it's a little bit touchy for me to attempt to speak on their behalf. However, I have been a Black woman, and clearly I have quite a bit of experience in that particular angle or aspect of coming into the moderate and or right positioning. And so I figured that I'm getting enough input, I'm getting enough DMs, I'm getting enough comments under my posts on Instagram, and it's time to create a space for people who are just really emotionally troubled right now. Not to say that they're having such emotional issues that they can't function in life, but just feeling a loss, feeling as if they made space in their life for something new by getting rid of the old that no longer served them. But now that they've got this space, it's actually become like a vacuum in a sense, and there's a need for something to fill that empty space. There is that transitional phase where more support is needed and requested. And so that's why I have created a Patreon page, and I have called it the Bus Transfer. Now, sounds really, really odd, but to be honest, I called it the Bus Transfer because as I was thinking about what am I going to call this? What is this really going to be about? If I were to describe my Patreon page, what would I say to individuals? And I thought about, this is really a journey. It's a transition. It's a process. It's a voyage, so to speak, out of a whole way of living and thinking and approach to life. It's transitioning out of that and into the new. And what does that really look like if I were to put a term on it? And for some reason, the first thing that came to my mind and stuck with me was a bus transfer. So I remember back way long time ago, it's been many years since I've actually been on a bus, but I remember long ago when I did ride the bus as a kid, I think going to school sometimes, that I would sometimes get a transfer if I was going to go somewhere else directly after I got off at stop number 1. And so when you think about a transfer, a little slip of paper, at least it used to be back in the 80s, where it allows a rider on public transportation vehicle to pay for a single trip, but to continue on a portion of the trip on another bus. So you start on one bus, but then you end up transferring to another bus. And I like that concept of starting in one route, one way of thinking, one way of doing, one way of voting. And, something happens midstream somewhere along the line and you decide that, I want to get off this bus. I want to get onto a new bus. I want to transfer. And you're doing it in a very public space. So what that means is that even though it is a private decision that you are making, but you are susceptible to ideologies and interactions with people in a very public forum, in a very public way. We have people protesting, groups, masses of people who are aligning themselves and or separating themselves from different ideologies, or they are moving to a certain group ideology en masse in groups. And so this is a public conversation happening, and these public conversations, whether it be on social media or in personal life, are talking about issues that are really tugging at people's hearts in a very public way. And we often use public transport, so to speak, like the transfer of ideologies, the information highway, the internet, the social media platforms. We go to these platforms to learn more or to solidify what we're already thinking about. So all of this is taking place in public. And so to be able to navigate the public transfer of knowledge, the public ideologies that are just being shouted from rooftops right now, in order to do that, many of us taking that transfer ticket from the bus driver, so to speak, and saying, I want off, or I'm going to continue traveling, but I'm going to be going in a different direction or to a different destination. So for me, bus transfer encapsulates not only the movement from one position to another, but the process of transferring in between them. And so this is that transfer ticket. This is the space where I discuss within my own sphere how I have been navigating that transfer, that space. And I want to share those tips with you all, but I also just want to speak much in the same way that I do here on my podcast. But I want to cover a variety of topics, but it's going to be more in depth on each topic, that things that I would not discuss anywhere else, not even here on Patreon. So while I might give a little snippet of it here in my podcast or on my YouTube channel, Leah Love Online, or I might do a snippet post on my Instagram, which is also Leah Love Online, where I will be going in depth now, either via video or audio, is going to be on my Patreon account, which is The Bus Transfer. And I'm really looking forward to this because I've got a couple of different opportunities for you all. So as you may know, Patreon has tiers. So you can subscribe to the Patreon account using a tier. So you might have a tier 1, which is $5 a month. Tier 2 might be $7.50 a month or $10 a month. And then it goes up from there. And each tier has its own individual offerings. And I really like that because that allows you to customize the content. And so what I've created is 3 different tiers. And so on the first tier, that is what I simply call, the transfer. And so this is for $5 a month. You can subscribe or unsubscribe at any time. You're not beholden to a contract or anything. And this is your first stop, kind of like on the bus route, so to speak. You've already made the decision that you're in the process of transferring your positions and your alignments, and you just really want a space to hear more about what's happening in the process of transferring, or more about topics from the perspective of someone who is already transferred through that position and more into the conservative mindset. This is $5 a month. It's the catch-all place where I just cover all types of topics that are important to most of us. And so you can kind of get in where you fit in. And you will have, access to all of those posts. Second tier is what I call the Blackistan transfer, and this is $10 a month. This tier will have access to all $5 a month tier content, but this particular tier is also by special request, and this is a tier where I add bonus content, whether it's video or audio. And it's open to everyone. I'm saying that at the outset. It's open to any race. However, because I am a Black woman, I have a particular perspective on what it's like to be Black and transfer out of the highly radical liberal thinking or the pro-Black upbringing that many of us have been indoctrinated with as a Black individual in America. So that is a particular perspective that I have a perspective on. And so this one, even though again it's available to all races, there's no segregation here, but it's just that this may be a specified content that the general public may not really have deep interest in, only because they've never lived as a Black person, may not even be able to relate to some of it. But there's also, again, a great deal of individuals who follow me on Instagram who are not Black but are very interested in the Black perspective in terms of how it happens that we went from what we experienced growing up, being raised Black in Black America, into our current status. And I have been actually asked about that often. But again, it will be content that is geared towards the Black perspective, just in terms of leaving that. Now, Blackistani is a catch-all phrase that refers to the extremely detrimental aspects of what's commonly known as Black culture, in air quotes, because this is something that a lot of maybe white folks are not, privy to, but it's things that growing up in a Black household, you just heard by cousins, aunts, uncles, whatever it was, the environment, it was the quote unquote Black experience, which is not to say that all Black people experience all aspects of it at all times, because again, we are not a monolith, but yet we are expected in many ways to hold ourselves to the quote-unquote Black identity, even if we haven't actually been raised in all aspects of it. And that's also something that I'm really going to be discussing there. So again, even though you may not be Black, but you're still interested in that content, if you were to go into the Blackistani transfer tier, which is $10 a month because it's got that additional bonus information in there, then you would have access to it. However, it's not a space where I will be discussing racism per se. I will not be discussing whether or not there is racism. I will not be arguing over whether or not there's systemic oppression or a systemic racism. And I also will not be allowing for people to argue amongst themselves, because this tier does have some community community components in it, where you can interact with others, but I won't have any arguing back and forth, or I won't have people who clearly have not arrived participating in debates about the Black experience. This is a drama-free zone, and it's also a space where I also don't want people to invalidate other people's experiences, but it's not a space where people are going to start trauma bonding and talking about how horrible their Black life has been and what whites have done to them and their perspectives. It's not for that. It's for people who have already transitioned out of that, but now they just want support on this new gray area, this new space that they're in. It can be quite trying. And so I will be putting reminders up, but this is going to be absolutely critical, at least for my growth, is being able to make sure that I am having conversations about this particular aspect. So that's tier number 2. And then tier number 3, it's simply what I call the VIP transfer ticket. And so the VIP transfer, that's $20 a month. And this has access to all levels, both the first and the second tier. But here is where I will do live streams. Here is where I'll actually have a private community portal where people can chat with each other. Here is where I will provide Q&A sessions. Here is also where I will have downloadable documents when I create them, and I can share them. So I might speak of these documents in the other levels, but to actually have access to these, small ebooks or e-pamphlets or just documents, things that I've found, I will provide them to the VIP transfer group. You also get a shout out of your name in my various content, as well as you'll have the ability to make special requests for topics for me to cover. Super excited about that. There's so much more to be offered, and you can read about each of these tiers on my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/thebustransfer. And so you'll be able to see it there. And I'm just super, super excited. I just launched it this morning, and I will be going in later today to upload some content. And I can't wait to get started, because other than Instagram, I haven't really been delving into these matters via video for quite some time. I haven't done videos in a while, needed to take a break, but I'm ready to get back in there and just go all in. But I needed a space that was private, that I could have a bit more control over, because even just the last podcast that I did, I stream my podcast onto my YouTube channel, and already got what I still will call Blackistani commentary that wanted to throw me back into the black box, the black identity, the black culture box. And so this is the type of issues I don't want to have to keep confronting on a regular basis when I upload content. Not to say that I can't take it, I can't take any pushback, and that's not at all what I'm saying here. But there comes a time when you're just beyond that elementary level trauma bonding and having to explain yourself to people. I'm really beyond that. I really want to just move forward and help work with and learn also from others who are beyond that, who are now at the next phase where, okay, I'm done. I've let go of this victimhood and now I am moving on to more freedom. So I'm super excited to have you guys there. Thank you all so much for listening to my podcast. And I hope to see you on Instagram /Leah Love Online. Facebook is the same, facebook.com/Leah Love Online. You can also find me at my website, my articles that I upload at leahloveonline.com, and now on Patreon at patreon.com/thebustransfer. So I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.